Okay, hello everyone. I would like to welcome all of you to Filmfest Ghent, and more specifically to the first day of the World Soundtrack Awards and Film Music Days. My name is Salma Mediavilla Aboulaoula. I'm a film and media scholar at Ghent University, and I'm absolutely honored to moderate this talk. So as part of the 25th edition of the World Soundtrack Awards and Film Music Days, we're here to celebrate and discuss the work and vision of the Composers Diversity Collective. The CDC is this year's recipient of the 2025 Industry Awards, and this will be presented to them later this evening. So this award wants to recognize individuals or organizations whose efforts have made a lasting and meaningful contribution to the film music industry, and the CDC has been honored for its mission to create a more inclusive and representative creative landscape, one that really enriches the soundtracks of our favorite films and series. It was founded by Michael Abels, and it's also led by co-president Sandro Morales-Santoro and Amritha. And yeah, their view on it is to create, or it envisions an entertainment industry that reflects the diversity of our societies. And our conversation today will explore how the CDC continues to grow and adapt within this landscape. And so we will be reflecting on its beginnings, the current state of diversity in screen music, and then also the ways the collective challenges stereotypes about creativity and representation. So I would love to introduce the people of sitting here with me on the couch, and I'm very thrilled to be joined by them today. The first one, of course, being Michael Abels. He's a two-time Emmy-nominated composer known for his groundbreaking scores for Jordan Peele's Get Out, Us, and Nope, and most recently also for the worldwide #1 limited Netflix series Sirens, starring Julianne Moore. Then also Sandro Morales-Santoro. He's an award-winning Venezuelan composer behind Marvel Animation's The Secret History of Venom, as well as Miguel Ferrer's feature called The Shadow of the Sun, which was served as Venezuela's official submission for the 2024 Oscars. And last but certainly not least, Amritha, who is a Sundance Composers Lab alumna, and she began her career with the Academy Award-winning composer Michael Dana on 500 Days of Summer, and also whose recent work on Disney's Mira, Royal Detective, earned her 2 Annie nominations, as well as an ASCAP Composer's Choice Award for Best TV Scores. I would invite you all to give them a warm round of applause. Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank all three of you for coming all the way over from the US to our small city of Ghent. We have a lot to cover in this hour, and also a lot of questions from the audience as well. So I suggest we start the same way all narrative films do, with the beginning. So the CDC was founded in 2028, and Michael, you were the founder of the collective. I was wondering, how would you describe the film music industry at that time, and what prompted you to start this initiative of the CDC?
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you. I scored Get Out, and Get Out was released and was very successful, and I was suddenly thrust into this whole media music world. And I would go to our events, and there weren't many people who looked like me. And when there were, we would kind of make eye contact, like, I see you, and as we all do, people would always say, well, we should hang out. And that often doesn't happen. But finally, we just thought, we just have to pick a place and a time and send out an invite. And we did that with only 2 weeks prior to the date that we had chosen, which is not how you plan parties, by the way. There was no save the date, but I thought, if we get 10 people, that'll be a success. Well, there were 50 people there. And that, I think, just really spoke to the need for community, for us to feel like we were a part of something that we didn't necessarily see that we were a part of. And therefore, there must be other people who feel the same way that we do. And so it was born out of that spirit, out of seeking community and representation. And that's where we began.
And I was wondering, Amritha and Sandro, you were there from the start as well. Did you experience the film music industry the same way Michael just described? And how did you then enroll in the CDC? How did that look like?
Thank you again for having us. I think, yes, the industry, I can speak for my own experience as a, Latino, Latinx composer. I feel like there's something very important, which is representation. I'm an immigrant from Venezuela, from a small city called Maracay, and I had this dream of scoring film, and it felt like something impossible, like being from that small town. And then I see Gustavo Santaolalla, an Argentinian composer, win back-to-back Oscars for incredible scores. And that made me feel like, well, maybe someone like me can actually work in this kind of industry. And today I see, very little. I mean, we're talking 20 years later, and even with all of the work that we do, it's hard to find, composers with my background scoring films, scoring at least like studio films. And it's a little sad and disappointing. And I have a nephew, a daughter that they're into music, and if they end up like following this kind of career, I want them to see themselves reflected. I want them to believe that they can do it as well. Like for me with Santaolalla, but again, it's been so long. So yeah, I felt the same way. And so for that first meeting that Michael's talking about, like I received an invite from a friend who knew Michael, and said, there's this meeting of composer of color about diversity and blah blah, and I was there, and it was incredible. And since then, I remember that very first day I told Michael, whom I didn't know at the time, I just went in and say, hey, this is incredible. I think like we can create such a beautiful community. Like anything you need, like I'm there. And I think like the third event was at my house. So,
that's right.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I've been involved ever since, and Amritha as well. I don't know if you want to share.
Hi. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having us. What I wanted to add, in addition to the things that Michael and Sandro have said, it was that bottom-up desire to be part of a community, to see yourselves reflected in each other. But there was also this, reality that we keep hearing, we'd love to hire a person of color, but there just aren't any, who are composers. And that led us to this sort of desire to have a directory, because we would look around and see that we knew there were composers of all kinds of backgrounds who were amazing. Like, these weren't even just students who had just gotten started. So that was sort of our motivation to kind of, help build an awareness, not just amongst ourselves, but also within the industry of our presence.
I think what you said just now about the excuse in this industry, but also an excuse that most of us already know as well, is we don't know where to find them. I think the innovative thing of the CDC, when I read about it, was that you offered a sort of pragmatic solution for this, especially the threefold solution that you also put on the website, stating that you want to focus on visibility, mentorship, and education, and then also community engagement. And based on what you were saying now, it seemed that it started off as a small idea that then became big. And I was wondering, who can apply to be part of this collective? Or put differently, how does the CDC define diversity within the mission statement you were just talking about?
I think when we started, we were very naive. We're just a bunch of composers. We have zero experience in nonprofit work. And so we thought if we went to websites and looked at how do they define diversity, we could just have all these checkboxes. And if you identified in any of these ways, then feel free to join us. Over time, we've realized that's actually not a very helpful way because it's simply how you self-identify, but it leaves out our allies. And we all know that to make change, it can't just be your small group. It has to be, within the larger community. And there were so many people who wanted to assist us, to help us, to join with us. So we've evolved to adapt our mission or our membership to follow your belief. So if you believe that, our industry should be representative and it should be inclusive and open, then please join us. It's open to anyone who shares our vision.
Of course, the CDC is way more composers than the three of you sitting here. And you were just mentioning earlier that there's also other people who were nominated for awards here as well. So maybe you can say who they are, and that way we also get a more broad idea of who is sitting in the CDC, apart from the three of you, of course.
Oh, nominated here at Morales-Santoro?
Yeah.
Well, we have Chris Bowers. Actually, John Powell, who's one of our advisory board members. So I would consider him a member. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else that we're missing. Well, in the audience today, we have one of our advisory board members, Nainita Desai. She'll be speaking on Thursday. Right, Nainita? Anyone else that you can think of? But we've had, members who've attended, obviously Michael Abels, who have been spotlighted here at Ghent before as well.
And I think what we just talked about now was the fact that the CDC tries to offer a solution to the fact that we can't find diverse composers. But we also talked about earlier how there's this sort of idea that minority composers might have a limited creative or stylistic range. Do you find personally, or maybe also within the working of the CDC, that the music you're asked to compose oftentimes is tied to your cultural background or your ethnic or ethnicity?
So I think we always, as artists, the short answer to your question is yes. But we find as artists that people are always wanting to put us in a box that is maybe it's based on how we look, but also could be based on whatever you did last. Whatever they know you for is what they think you can do. And so we are always trying to, there's the balance of jobs will come to you that are based on what people think you do, which is based on the box that they've put you in. And then you also have an obligation to get yourself out of that box, both so people don't define you that way, but also because it's fun and you want to do things differently. So, so I find that I've been, the horror composer, or the composer of color, or however, and those jobs come, and then you have to balance that with what it is you also can do, or what you, or what you feel like you haven't had the opportunity to do.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I find it challenging, and I found it myself challenging throughout my career. Again, as a composer from Venezuela, of like the assumption of you can do Latin music, and all of us have studied the same, traditions in music, and the same classical music, or jazz, or like, and I mean, part of the subject of the talk is like, yes, I mean, we have a specific background like everyone does, and your background and your history just enriches your musicality and what you can do. So of course, like it adds to what I can do. My background, the kind of music that I grew up listening, but at the same time, I want to be considered for all kinds of projects. I don't want to, like Michael said, be put in a box of like, oh, this is your name. This is the thing you can do. And also, like I've come to discover as well, living in the U.S. now for 20 years. I made a decision to move to the U.S. to migrate, and it makes it makes a little bit more sense that I have an accent and blah blah blah. But again, like we have members and board members like Tony Morales, who has my last name, but he was born in Texas, and he's has a shared culture, and it's unfair that he would be seen as a composer with different stylistic capabilities than someone else who was born in the same town but just has a different name, right? So I think part of our work is to find ways to help composers break that stigma, and we've discussed, yes, sometimes you get your first opportunity out of your background, right? Like we're trying to find a composer who knows about Venezuela, and then I'm like, okay, I'm there, I'll do it. But then like after you get your opportunity and you start working, you wanna be able to break out of that and have different options. So hopefully our work is helping composers just showcase all of their talents and be considered for different kinds of projects.
I don't know, Amritha, if you want to add something, or if that's okay. I was also wondering if you feel like this aspect of diversity being costed onto you as something like your first job is tied to it, whether you feel like it is evolving in a different pace when it comes to like diversity within the composer's context or film music industry, as opposed to, for example, with actors and directors, where we see that this is also something that has been discussed for a long time. Is it, to put it differently, is it a new discussion being had within your industry, or is it at the same level as it is being done for actors and directors, for example?
That's a great question. I think it's. I don't have a lot of statistics on that. All I have is my observations. My observation is that it's a cultural shift. Like at the time that you heard of people deliberately casting, seeking out diverse casts, there would also be people who were seeking out diverse composers and other people behind the camera. And to go back to your other question, I mean, sometimes I actually counsel young composers when they are saying, how can I get work? Is one thing is everybody's got a tribe, and your tribe is people who think they have something in common with you, whether it might be the ethnicity, but it might just be you're from the same hometown. Anything that gives you a connection with someone who makes them feel like you're capable of telling their character's story is something that you can use to collaborate and end up getting credits, and it's hugely important. So everyone needs to get with their tribe to tell stories from that community. And it seemed to me in about the last 10 years that there was a lot of opportunity for stories outside of the mainstream to get told, and because I would see them on streaming services and places. And now we've seen the culture shifting. And I don't think as many projects like that are getting greenlighted. And so what I'm trying to say, I think, is it's not just about the composing community. It's about when there's a cultural shift about the projects that are being made, that's going to affect everyone who's involved in the project, because that also is a way of saying, if not overtly, that diversity and inclusion is not as important as we thought it was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. And that's really frustrating and sad.
Yeah, I don't know if someone wants to add something to that. Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting question you ask, because as composers, we're not in front of the camera, and even those sorts of initiatives that have been intentionally seeking out representation, like Crazy Rich Asians, the composer was not of Asian descent. Same thing with Mulan, the live action of Mulan. So it is interesting. Sometimes I think as composers too, we just have a certain set of abilities, and because we're behind the scenes, we're not always thought about. I think below the line, sometimes we're not thought about in quite the same way as people who are in front of the screen. But I do think it's very important that all areas of the storytelling world are on board with this inclusion, because we can't, like as Michael said, if the stories aren't being told by people who want that understanding in their score, then it makes it harder to be inclusive.
Yeah, definitely. And I was wondering, because now we're talking about collaborations and how that's very important. Do you have some examples of films and series you worked on, or maybe starting composers from the CDC worked on, that exemplify this successful and fruitful collaboration you're talking about? I know you were talking about Jordan Peele and how you composed for most of his movies, and how did that look like? Because of course that was before the CDC, but maybe, I don't know if you want to share an anecdote of how he got to you, how did he find your work?
Well, so I was known primarily as a concert composer, and some of those works ended up on YouTube, where they got a few views. But one of them, I guess, was this person who is known for comedy named Jordan Peele. And Jordan is an extraordinary auteur who he does this with actors too. He goes not by what work they have done, but he's able to see them in a way as like what they should be doing or what they could be doing. And he heard my music, and he had the post-production supervisor call me. So I got a cold call saying from a guy claiming to be a producer, saying if I had ever heard of Jordan Peele, and he's directing a horror movie for us, and would you be interested in talking to him about scoring it. And I thought it was a joke. I thought I was being punked, but I said, sure. And so I got sent the script to Get Out, just cold. And I had a lunch with Jordan. He's as smart and funny as he seems. And I just realized that this was a huge opportunity. And I would have done anything he asked to help him be successful. But he heard in my music, I think, an understanding of both horror and how scary the film needed to be, but also of the African-American experience. And so he was clearly looking for someone who he felt could span the disparate worlds that he thought that was needed for that job. So that's how I got involved with that.
I think what you were describing now is also a sort of intrinsic motivation that Jordan had to find the right composer, as opposed to what you were talking about earlier, like oftentimes looking for the success formula. If you already have heard about this composer and he has done this work, you go towards them instead of looking for people you wouldn't think of in the first place because they haven't made music for that genre. Is this something that you with the CDC try to actively, proactively try to help with?
Yeah, for sure. I think, there's a recognition on our part that the studios, there's a tendency to avoid risk, which is to a degree understandable because of the budgets that are in play. But again, like, as we've seen, and we're seeing this year, like when risks are taken, and the budgets are put in the hands of incredible creatives, magic happens, right? We're seeing incredible films that are out of the formula that was used ad nauseum of the superhero movie, of the sequel and prequel and whatever. So they're taking risk, and they're realizing, okay, well, we can make money with this, or make great art through this way. And it's something that happens with composers, and like you're saying, because of the trying to avoid risk, they don't want to take a chance on new talent. Mm-hmm. And it happens with cinematographers, it happens with editors, it happens with directors, it happens very much so with composers. And what ends up happening is that a very small group of composers gets hired over and over again. And the reality is that there's only so much that one person can do in 1 year. and so we have these teams of composers behind the main composers doing a lot of stuff, and when you see the people that are writing all of that music, you see a lot of diversity, right? So at the very top, the names, that are getting the credit, is tends to be very uniform, and then there's a lot of diversity underneath. So so what we do at the CDC, is that we try to connect our members with the studios. We try to have, we've had events with Lionsgate, with Universal, with Disney, ABC, with Apple, sometimes in person, sometimes virtual. And it's just about like connecting the executives with the composers, like making them feel comfortable about who we are, making them like listen to our music and realize, like, again, like no matter your last name, no matter where you come from, you can score a horror film, you can score an adventure film, an animation film. You're capable of getting the work done, and at the end of the day, it's not a risk hiring because we're all professionals, So.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's not a risk because, as you said, the work is being done, but it's invisible, right? So you want to put it more up front. I know I talked about the Jordan Peele anecdote, but I would love to hear if there are some kind of collaborations you did or music you composed for a movie that for you felt like an example of how it could be.
In terms of, can you clarify when you say like the perfect situation in terms of like people seeking you out and
collaborative wise, where you notice that there is a sort of willingness to go and look out for a more diverse idea of what the composer could be, that it's not always the same success formula we were talking about. This can be maybe from someone in the CDC or an own experience. Or if you don't think of something that's also perfect.
I mean, I will say much of the work I have done is in some degree influenced by South Asian, like quite a few of my projects have been. And for me, I love that when we're not looking at it as a surface or stereotypical interpretation of that culture. I think my collaborations with South Asian directors or people who, like Disney, who is doing the Mirror Royal Detective, there was a desire to do more than just do something surface. It was wanting to work with me to find a sound that could still represent that Disney quality, but also, recognize the diversity within India. And so they also were aware, oh, wow, there's different unique, folk instruments and, different folk styles. And what was actually really helpful to have someone like me do that is because I know those. I grew up with those. I love those. And to write that music, it's fast. It's fast for me. And you have to be fast with a TV show that's animated and is 24, episodes in a season. But yeah, I think there's nothing wrong for me to support South Asian voices or to be involved in that storytelling. I think that that's wonderful, and I will continue to enjoy being part of those collaborations. I love when we can go to concept and we don't, pick a sitar and tabla. We do something really interesting and different and representative of our way of taking art to, a different level.
So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is also that your cultural heritage is a richness that you want to provide also in your music, but you don't want to just be put in a box like we said multiple times.
I just want Salma to speak for me. She's so succinct. Wow. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. Go ahead, yeah.
A couple. It's sometimes difficult to share these anecdotes because it's for a lot of reasons. But I've worked with a filmmaker named Corey Finley, who did a film called Bad Education. He did another one called Landscape with Invisible Hand. And one of them has nothing to do with racial issues at all. and I was the darkest face in the room, so to speak. And then another one, Landscape with Invisible Hand, actually it's interesting when I've done a couple films where there's been there have been black main characters, but it's not been about race. But except because they're the main characters, it is in a way that's in the sidelines, and I love things like that because I think it causes people to look at things differently. And so in Landscape with the Invisible Hand, nothing about the score it was about a kind of a very sad alien invasion that causes a worldwide depression. It's kind of a dark comedy, but it was not about it was about socioeconomic things, and seeing black people as the lead characters was just an interesting take that didn't really blend over into the music for that project. But I'm always aware of how much what element diversity plays in a project, and whether that's purely in the subject matter or in the score, or I guess another one I'll mention is there's a movie I worked on called Chevalier, and it's about the composer Joseph Bologna, who was mixed race from Guadeloupe, which is an island in the Caribbean, and he lived in the late 1700s and was a contemporary of Mozart, and he wrote music that sounds very Mozartian, but he was a violinist and was also a fencing champion at the time in Paris. He's got this extraordinary story. So I was hired to do the on-camera music. Because he's a composer, it involves some of his music and then some music that's improvised and sort of in his style, and it's really a blend between arranging and composing. And so I wanted to make sure that the solos that he performed were performed by a black violinist. It was just, how can we tell this story and not make sure that that's an important value? And so while it wasn't suggested to me by the studio, when I said, and we have to have a black they were very supportive of that and made sure that that was true. And so it was really nice to find that if you are in a project like that you can stick up for representation and say it's important, and find that you're not the only voice, that you are supported in making that happen. So.
Thank you for those anecdotes, and I guess it's also based or on the intention of the people inviting you to do the work as well, whether there's room left for you to interpret it the way you want to interpret it, the different layers of it as well.
And just to add something, I think it's very important that when creators are looking for, or the studios or production is looking for diversity, that they do it with the intention of inclusion, of including your voice, right? Because a lot of times, again, it's all about, when they do it about like ticking a box, that's when it's done wrong. And sometimes when it's done with the right intention, when it's about including the voice and like hearing you, and I think both of you gave beautiful examples of being included in the conversation and being considered, and accepting your suggestions as the experts in the matter, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, I think also oftentimes within the discussion of diversity policy, there's also this risk of other people who might look at it as a sort of diversity hire. I think we discussed this before, Amritha, and that this is also entrenched with this idea that there is a limited creative room within this. How do you deal with this idea of, or the notion of diversity hire within the CDC, for example, with new composers coming there and who might be having this imposter syndrome? How do you go about this within the community you're building?
I mean, I think I'll say something briefly that I heard from Amritha. I'm gonna blame you. No, but I think it's very. No, I'm saying it because it's very wise. Sometimes it's whether you have the luxury of having that thought, right? It's like, yeah, if sometimes it's like if it's you're the diversity hire, but it's your first big studio film, you're like, bring it on, you know. And then you have the opportunity to show that you deserve to be there. I mean, luckily, I mean, I'm very proud to say that a lot of people who have been that we've seen, like that started as members of the CDC and are now like doing incredible work. They all are there because they deserve it, you know. So again, like it's such a competitive industry that it's hard to, you know, if it feels like it's because of diversity and whatever, you just take the opportunity and make the most of it and show them and represent for the rest of it. So I don't know if you want to add something about that.
I think the truth is the studios aren't doing anyone any favors. They're not like, oh, you know what would be really great? Let's take a big risk on someone and just throw them into our, you know, multi-million-dollar film. They want the best. They want things to work smoothly. They want you to deliver. You have to be proven. So anyone who gets into that position has definitely earned it. I think the concept of a diversity hire is a sort of insidious notion that people who are outside of whatever the mainstream looks like don't deserve to be there. Or that there's an idea that, you know, it was always ours to begin with, and we're giving you a chance out of the goodness of our hearts. We've just seen so much quality of ability that, again, if you're lucky enough to get your foot in the door, then yeah, like Sandro said, go kill it, make us all look good, but also to try not to take on that mindset that you don't deserve to be there. Because again, you know, however you got in the door is great. But I also just want to point out, in terms of numbers, there's so few of us still in TV, in film. It's not like we're actually taking a whole bunch of people's jobs. You know, if you look at the percentage of us, we still have a long way to go before suddenly people are, you know, just giving us diversity hires. So
it's more of a scarcity mindset and an excuse that comes afterwards that, yeah, you're a diversity hire. But yeah, like you said, it's more complex than that. And most of the times I think it's interesting that you said that there's a lot of competition, so that it makes sense that painting people off as a diversity hire sort of also makes it easier to deal with your own ego, I guess, if I can put it like that. I was also wondering, and this is a very broad question, because CDC was founded in 2018, and today it's 2025. What are some crucial changes you feel have happened from then to now on within this sector?
I would just say this is not about the CDC itself, but just about the shift in culture that we're experiencing now is not something that I felt like people would ask me a few years ago, do you see is the industry any more open to diversity? And I said, well, it seems like there's definitely been a shift, but we don't know whether it's a fad or a sea change. And a sea change means a generational shift. And so now we're politically seeing a shift back, and we're having to react to that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I was also wondering within the context of the US now, which is I think you're alluding to as well, how can the CDC continue its working, especially with diversity big in the name? Do you feel like you have to reinvent yourself as a collective to be able to continue doing the work you're doing, or is the pressure for now still limited?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's, of course, challenging. Like Michael is saying, like there's the political changes are bringing what feels like a culture change in the country. But I mean, our job and our mission and vision remains the same. Mm-hmm. You know, we keep fighting for the spaces that we've gained to maintain them and just to gain, to make more gains and to make lasting change that is not up to whomever is in power or the culture of the moment, but it's something actually lasting. And I think the more you see diversity in film composing, I mean, to me, it's a wave that is unstoppable. The start is the challenge. Like the composers who have the talent, who are ready but haven't had the opportunity, like that, breaking that barrier is where a lot of our work is centered on. But the reality is that over the last decade, we've managed to get a lot of very talented composers. Not us, I mean the CDC, but I mean in the industry as a whole. This whole change of culture and consciousness has made it so that a lot of composers are working and are making it. And you see people like our members like Amanda Jones, for instance, who is doing incredible shows like Murderbot, who have, it's not about like, she's just writing music, it's not about like any specific culture. You get people like Tony Morales, like Carlos Rafael Rivera, like, so many incredible composers. I mean, Michael Abels working on Star Wars, and you have, Nanita Desai. I mean, you have incredible, yeah. Yeah, they're not necessarily tied to your background, and those composers, they've made it, they broke through, and they are gonna keep working because they deserve it, because they have the talent, and there's no going back on that. Our work continues. We keep being a resource for the industry. Our existence over these past 7 years has created a pressure, I feel, whether the interest in DEI has, slowed down or not, our existence is there. The studios keep reaching out, the executives, the independent filmmakers keep reaching out. There are concerts, and I mean, this is an example of our existence and our work being noticed, and us being an influence in the industry. I feel like we're gonna continue working, and we're gonna continue having an effect. Yeah.
That was a beautiful answer, thank you. And that was also one of my next questions, also, how does international recognition like the World Soundtrack Awards and receiving the industry awards, how can it strengthen your work and also the aims and the mission statement you have? Does it generate a sort of cross-cultural solidarity, or how do you reflect on being here now?
I feel like it does. It's a huge honor to be here, and it's courageous of the World Soundtrack Awards to make this statement. It's very personally inspiring to me, and we want to be a resource in a community, and so having an international profile in any way is absolutely what we're about.
Yeah, and also the thing I cherish the most about the CDC is the community part of it, and something like this only makes us more, noticed all over the world, and hopefully our community can grow, can include more people, and yeah, that just gives us strength to keep fighting the fight.
I think it's definitely also an inspiration maybe for other countries to follow up what you're doing in the US and globally, maybe whether it is a smaller organization or bigger, because as you stated at the beginning, it started with just a few people being contacted and then 50 people turning up. So I think there's always a need for these organizations. And I was wondering whether there are already questions from the audience. I can't imagine there not being any questions. There's been so much talked about.
They're so well behaved. My
Yeah.
goodness.
No? Yeah, here. In the front.
Good
Hi.
catch.
Hi. I have a quick question. I'm from Peru. So I was just wondering, as a international composer, I don't know what term to use for it. Until what point do you make it part of your profile? You know, because you were saying about how you were talking about diversity hires and all those things. So up to what point do I include Peruvian within the music composer for film and TV? Because I think it shouldn't matter. But I don't know nowadays, because I'm just starting out, I don't know how important it is to include it.
It's an awesome question. I think it depends what kind of, if you feel like that would be significant to the filmmakers you want to connect with. Because if there are people from that part of the world who are telling stories that they're seeking someone with that, even if it's subconscious, that kind of connection, that instant language, you just get each other. If that's important to you, that should be, it's absolutely up to you. We leave it open for people if they want to or they don't want to include that part of it. I think in an ideal world, it wouldn't matter. We all wish that unconscious bias didn't exist. But unfortunately, it does. And so in a perfect world, we wouldn't need the Alliance of Women Film Composers, or we wouldn't need the CDC. But there's no obligation, just because you're a person of color, you have a cultural background, to join us or feel like you need to do it that way. It's whatever makes sense to you, I don't have a timeline, but I think it's more about you're a multifaceted person. It shows that there's some part of you that might connect with another storyteller. But again, that's, if it's something that you feel is significant. Yeah. I mean, and by the way, I'm sure that you also write that you're interested in reggae or you're interested in, some form of music. Like that's all part of your identity. So.
There's a question in the back as well.
I'm fascinated by this microphone that you can just throw and I want one of those.
That'd be really funny if you used it in the orchestra.
Actually, she said it would be really fun if it was used in the orchestra.
Hi.
Can you imagine?
Sorry, I'm quite loud. Obviously, you as an organization and as composers, I assume you're all sort of LA, US based. Have you been able to do much outreach for sort of getting diversity worldwide? Obviously, in the world we live in, it's a lot easier. But I think as much as in the same way there's the diversity barrier, there's also a territory barrier. And so I was just interested in what you've been able to do to get diversity on a worldwide basis and, more local diversity in that sense.
So I would say for up to this point, our membership is open to anyone in any part of the world. Part of our community events and networking events are in person, unfortunately, in Los Angeles or in New York. But we do have, right now, we're starting a London chapter. So there's starting to be some in-person events over there. But also a lot of our events are virtual. So, and we have global membership that is our lowest, yearly membership price. So, and it gives you access to, a lot of the educational stuff, because we didn't mention that, but another way that we are trying to make a change is by, helping with the education of our members. So like having a lot of panels we've had panels with executives from studios, with directors, with composer agents, with PR agents. So, you get part, you can be part of that educational side of things, and also the community part of it, because we try to have at least every 2 months a mixer within our members, and at least half of those over a year are over Zoom. So yeah, that's what we're doing at the moment. In terms of like hiring and those kind of opportunities, it's harder for us to to do it at a global level for now, but yeah, hopefully in the future.
I was also going to say, come find us, because if you have ideas, this is a volunteer-run organization. It's hard to believe, but we're trying to actually write music and compose while also trying to, do these workshops, and so it's really just driven by altruism. So if you feel like you want to be participating in that in your home, in London or wherever, we would love to connect with you, and we'd be happy to support your efforts too.
Thank you. I don't know if there are any more questions from the audience. No? I think that was a beautiful note also to almost end the talk on. We still have 10 minutes left. A more general question, that is more, or not general, but more personal question. Are there any exciting works or things you're working on right now personally that we should be looking forward to in the upcoming year, months?
Michael first.
I'm working on so I'm doing some concert pieces. I have a piece for the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra that's coming up in February, and I have and I'm the composer in residence for the Detroit Symphony for the next couple years, and so they're doing several different works of mine over the course of a couple of seasons. I'm also working on a film with a Korean director who did a film that in English was called The Wailing, which was in about 2016. His name is Na Hong-jin. And it is a completely Korean produced film. And so I'm working with the Korean film industry. And it's a wonderful cultural learning experience, because every assumption I have about how we make film and what's expected in the American way of doing it, can't take any of those things for granted, right? Because it's culturally how they choose to do things. And the film is in Korean, and I speak with the director via the translator. And it's been a fascinating process. And I think I'm going to end up going, when we mix, I think I'm going to be going to Seoul for the mix, and from my first time in any Asian country, and I'm enjoying the music and the storytelling process, but also just the cultural collaboration process. I'm learning, and I just can't wait until we reach that stage. Anyway.
Well, I'm working on a TV show called Sugar Creek Mysteries, and it's a family drama comedy fun show. And the great thing about it is that it takes place in a small town in Ohio. And as a Latino composer, it's fun to do something that has nothing to do with my background, which tends to be the case, and it's also fun. But I've been lucky to get hired for a bunch of projects that are in the realm of like Americana, and I learned to play banjo and mandolin and stuff, so it's great. I play guitar, so it was easy. And I also just finished a commission by the Mozilla Foundation, the makers of the Firefox browser. They're doing some work on what they call imaginative intelligences, about how they're going to approach as a nonprofit their vision for AI, and so they're trying to include artists in the process, and listen to our concerns and our fears, and try to design their approach. in that way. So as part of it, they commissioned 6 works of art, and as a composer, they commissioned a music piece that I wrote, inspired by the current situation with immigrants in Los Angeles specifically, the raids from ICE, and the fear, pain, and the defiance that all of that is creating. And I was lucky to work with an amazing singer called Adriana Duque, who's from Venezuela, and with the Budapest Scoring Orchestra. So it's a piece that's coming out in a couple of weeks.
And I'm in the early stages of working with a filmmaker I've worked with before. Her name is Najwa Najjar. She's a Palestinian filmmaker, and she's doing a very ambitious, over-the-top musical. So I've come up to speed in the last little while, watching a bunch of musicals, which has been really fun. And it's also a period piece. It's set in Egypt, in a certain, like in the beginning of film, the film industry there, which was influenced by big band. And my grandfather was a drummer. He played in India, and they played big band. He was part of the most impactful big band, in India. So it feels really wonderful to be connecting with it and also have a huge learning curve at the same time. So
I think those are all things all of us will be looking forward to hear what you composed for it, and it sounds very exciting. We've run out of time, but if there's anything you would still like to add that maybe we didn't touch upon, I would love to hear. But if you're satisfied with the conversation, that's also perfectly fine.
I just want to thank you all for coming and having an interest in this subject, which is sometimes ponderous. And I just thank you for your presence and your interest.
And I think I speak for the audience as well when I want to thank you for the insightful conversation, for sharing your experiences, and also, more importantly, for the work you're doing with the collective. So I would really want you to give them a warm round of applause again. Thank you.